Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you listened to my story. Please give me a follow and like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment and provide feedback so I can improve the sound quality. Yes, I will now continue the unfinished story. Chapter 33, Silver Silk Castle, 1. Chapter 33, Silver Silk Castle, 1. Huaishan City, Southern Suburbs. Green mountains and rugged rolling hills were reminiscent of a thick green carpet covering the land. On one of the hills scattered several yellow and white dots. Upon a closer look, these were actually small residential houses. These houses were in the shape of cubes, built with cream-colored marble stone. The building walls and door frames were covered in green ivy, of which some of had blossomed small flowers. Below one of the houses stood two arched gates. Inside was a semi-outdoor resting area. There were 2 tables inside, and sitting by the left table were 4 people, resting and drinking tea. 2 middle-aged men and 2 young women sat across from each other. The older man had a well-trimmed beard. He was wearing a nice and delicate black suit. He looked around 40 years of age and had a wooden cane in one hand. He lifted the teacup from the table and took a sip. Mr. Kelly has come all the way here to discuss the collection of antiques of misfortune. This kind of enthusiasm is rare nowadays. His eyes landed on the middle-aged man sitting across from him. The man's skin was a bit pale. He had blonde, curly hair, and a blonde goatee, wearing a tidy white suit. He seemed relaxed and elegant. He was much younger, about 30 instead. His eyes were the most dazzling. They were like the finest rubies, transparent and crystal clear. I am also amazed by Mr. Quicksilver's enthusiasm, to not only collecting these antiques and jewelry by yourself, but also looking for their places of origin and background stories. The man sighed. Collectors like us, aren't we all intrigued by these things? The dream life of coming home to a house full of antiques with mysterious backgrounds. It's like our own house and lives had become mysterious, filled with powers unknown to men, Dale Quicksilver added with a smile. Exactly. That's the feeling. The blond man nodded. Life is always so boring, that's why we long for our lives to be filled with puzzles and mysteries. That is the most interesting part of finding these antiques of tragedy. Indeed. Dale Quicksilver approvingly nodded. His eyes glanced over the man's wrist. I unexpectedly came across an antique of tragedy while investigating a case, and I got hooked on collecting them ever since. Time flies by like an arrow. Over the past decade, I've collected hundreds of them in my house. Hundreds. The blond man's eyes gleamed with light. That's incredible. Only a man such as Detective Quicksilver is worthy of these treasures. I'm sure they are completely different from the stuff you had earlier. Anyway, the reason you have come here, is it related to antiques? Not exactly. Dale Quicksilver shook his head. He took over the pipe from Ms. Lan and smoked from it. He slowly blew a smoke ring. We are here for a well-known criminal in detective business. It's a serial killer case. The case was settled, that's why we have time to come and investigate. Is that so? The well-known criminal, would that be the Golden Hoop? The blond man mused as he pinched his beard. After receiving a positive answer, he continued, Golden Hoop had committed dozens of crimes all over the Federation. I heard that other than you, only one famous detective had met him face to face before. Would you be kind enough to inform me of this Golden Hoop story? I do apologize, it's not that I don't want to tell you. I have a non-disclosure agreement with the police department. Dale Quicksilver shrugged. Well, we might get going soon. I have to go to the Silver Silk Castle this afternoon. Would Mr. Kelly be interested in joining us? The Silver Silk Castle? I've heard of that shabby place over the years of living in Huaishan City. It's the inheritance of a military officer. He Didn't have enough money to maintain the castle, and he had sold most of the stuff in there, Kelly replied. I've heard that the castle was for sale, but it was too worn out and desolate, visitors had left as soon as they saw it. Are you planning on buying this castle? Just visiting the place, I don't plan on buying it. Dale Quicksilver laughed. He turned around and said a few words to S.I. Lan, who nodded in reply and walked out towards a two-floored house nearby, disappearing behind the green and thick bushes. The vegetation here is rich, and there are no signs of withering this late in the fall. If it wasn't too far from my home, I'd love to move here. Dale Quicksilver blew another smoke ring and lamented. I agree, that's why I've moved here and never wanted to leave, Kelly replied. He spoke a few words with the blonde girl with ponytail next to him. The girl stood up and walked towards the black car parked outside. From here to Silver Silk Castle is a 2-hour drive. It's almost 5 p.m. now. If we go at this time, we would have to come back during the late night. Or perhaps Mr. Dale was prepared to stay there for the night. Kelly stood up and questioned. I've spent a few nights there the past few days, no big deal. I talked with the castle's owner Mr. Nusfs and paid him some money. I have rented the castle for 2 months. Since everything in there was already sold or moved out, he didn't worry about it too much. Dale Quicksilver also stood up. On another note, you don't have to bring your car, there's nowhere to fill gas, we'd be better off riding in a carriage. That's true, I guess I have to bother you for a few days. No problem, we are all fellow collectors, and it's hard to find a friend with the same interest. I won't lie to you, my other friends are not too fond about this hobby of mine. Okay, enough talking, I'll get the carriage so we can get going soon. I'll see you in a bit. All right, I'll be right out. Kelly stood next to the table. He took a cup of tea and drank it bottom up. He watched as Dale Quicksilver walked over the grass towards a black carriage coming from afar. Ms. S.I. Lan was wearing a white trench coat. She jumped off the carriage to wait for him. The winding road stretched on, like a gray snake coiling towards the horizon. Far away on the road, 2 bullock carts filled with golden wheat moved slowly. A warm wind breezed over, sending the hems of Kelly's white suit flying. A relaxed and leisured atmosphere permeated the air. Kelly touched his chin. This beard feels so real. Of course it does. The blonde girl who left earlier had come back to him. The road to Silver Silk Castle is going to take at least 2 hours. In the carriage, we'll have to walk quite a distance in the mountain as well. I'm afraid we'll have to stay there for the night. Mr. Dale said we could stay at the castle for the night. Kelly smiled and said, let's go, don't let our detective wait too long. The girl watched Kelly's back as he left, her eyes glimmered with suspicion. Even though she knew he was undercover, it was still strange that from all aspects, Kelly was too mature and too real compared to Garen. He didn't seem like a teenage boy. As if Garen was Kelly's disguise, and the Garen turned Kelly was his true self. She shook her head and stopped the thought, quickly followed up. The two walked towards the waiting carriage on the road. Before getting into the carriage, Garen snapped a violet flower from the side of the road. He smelled it, and upon closer look, he discovered there were many tiny black bugs near the center of the flower bud. They looked like ants, and the flower was odorless. The group of 4 boarded the carriage. Dale and S.I. Lan sat in the front row, Garen and Grace sat in the back. The riding whip made a crisp snap sound, as 2 tall and strong horses pulled the carriage forward. The bells on their necks started ringing. Noticing the flower on Garen's hands, Dale Quicksilver commented, the flowers here are all odorless, but they seem to attract a lot of bugs. I wonder how that happens. Garen stretched out his index finger and let a bug climb onto it from the flower petal. It tickled his finger. The bug looked like a miniature ladybug. Its semicircle-shaped wings flapped occasionally to maintain balance. The origins of antiques of tragedy tend to involve different kinds of unusual phenomenon. This is quite common, isn't it? Garin smiled. If it were the same as any other place, I wouldn't have bothered to come here. It is a pity that you didn't bring any of your collections with you. I could have had the luck to take a look at them. Dale Quicksilver started laughing. I initially thought you were just a boasting fraud. I never thought you could tell apart the knockoff replicas of antiques of tragedy from the real ones so easily. I didn't expect to find such a bosom friend at a place like this. I thought I was the only one interested in these things. Same as I. Garin laughed along as he stripped a flower petal and flicked it out of the carriage. What is it about the Silver Silk Castle that drew your interest? I've lived here for so long without knowing anything remarkable about it. Dale Quicksilver handed the horsewhip to S.I. Lan. He took out a stack of papers from his leather bag and handed them over. These are some documents I've collected, take a look. Garin took them over. He saw the title of the first page, Castle Owner Found Dead. Underneath the title was a large paragraph of writing describing how the body was found. He flipped to the next page. It was a similar title. The third page was the same, except this one had a picture. It was a picture of the Silver Silk Castle. 3 owners of the castle died for no reason, killer unknown. They all died peacefully in their sleep without any trace of a struggle, like old-aged seniors who had lost their last breath. Strangely enough, these 3 owners were all strong, middle-aged military officers. Chapter 34, Silver Silk Castle, 2. Chapter 34, Silver Silk Castle, 2. The most recent death was the owner of the Silver Silk Castle from about 30 years ago. I am not sure which antique of tragedy it is, but I am trying to see just what's going on there, and I might even find it if I'm lucky, Dale Quicksilver added, while Garin nodded his head. Garin knew what an antique of tragedy was, and he thought his bronze cross was one of them. Although it could barely provide him with any potential, only about 1 point per week, it was better than nothing. Garin had no idea why an antique of tragedy could provide him with potential, and he wanted to know where the name came from. Those were the main reasons why he decided to travel to the Silver Silk Castle with Dale Quicksilver. The carriage left the city before noon and arrived at a green and yellow slope in the afternoon. There was a small forest in front of them, and the sun was beginning to set. The 4 got off the carriage and surveyed the forest. By the end of the forest, they could see an old-looking grey castle built upon a hill. The surface of the castle had burn marks all over it, and it was completely devoid of plant life. Outside the castle, the lawn was surrounded by fences and several trees, but they all looked grey and burned. The castle had 3 bartizans, and Garin could see many windows around it. However, everything looked black from a distance. This is Silver Silk Castle. I heard it caught fire 30 years ago and the next owner had no money to fix it, so now it looks like this. It was pretty sad, since the castle was famous for its garden. The word silver silk came from its beautiful exterior. Before the accident, the facade looked like it was covered with silver silk. Dale Quicksilver said, pointing at the castle. I don't think that's possible, Mr. Dale. If the accident happened 30 years ago, why does it still have this grey and black appearance? There should at least be some ivies or moss growing on it, Grace speculated. No one knows the reason. Some said the ash stopped the plants from growing, and some said plants just wouldn't grow there. There were many strange rumors about the castle, but they were all hard to believe, S.I. Lan said. Did you ever ask the locals about it? Grace scrunched her eyebrows and asked. No one lives around here. Farmers cannot grow anything on an area like this, and the closest towns are about 30 miles away, S.I. Lan answered. We will be staying in the castle tonight, right? Do we have enough supplies? Garen touched his fake beard and asked. We have more than enough. Me and Si Lan have stayed here for days, and the only problem was that we had to travel a long way to get back to the city. The environment here was good, and it was nice to stay in the castle. Let's go. We still have a long way to walk, maybe half an hour, Dale Quicksilver said as he nodded his head. What about the carriages? Garen asked. Just leave them here and someone will drive them back. I have everything planned. We took the carriages to get here, but we will have to walk back after we visit. It's about a 4-hour walk from here to Canoe Town, the nearest settlement, Dale Quicksilver explained. We will have to stay here for several days, I think, he continued. That's fine. I will enjoy my vacation, I guess. Grace, can you go back to the city and tell my family not to worry about me? Just tell them I am staying at my friend's home and I will be back after several days, Garen said with a light tone. How about letting me drive the carriage back and I'll leave it in town? Grace suggested. She knew Garen wanted her to hide the truth from his family. He was still a high school student and did not want his family to be worried about him. Sure, Dale Quicksilver nodded. The three watched Grace and the carriage disappear at the end of the road. Let's go. It's better if we can get there before the evening, Dale Quicksilver said, shaking the long bag in his hand. I brought my rifle and we can hunt some wild animals for a barbecue, he added. Sounds great. You're really well prepared. Garen smiled. I brought some spices, tea, and coffee beans. There is a river nearby and we can get some water from there. Si Lan smiled and showed Garen the red pouch in her hand. Let's see if you can make some good coffee, Garen said. I have some secret techniques. Si Lan had a mysterious smile on her face. I assume Mr. Kelly rarely goes camping. Unlike us detectives, sometimes we even have to camp in forests when chasing criminals, so we have to be prepared, she explained. You are right. Garen shrugged his shoulders. I only brought some emergency tools, some clothes, and some daily supplies. I am not as prepared as you, he replied. Well, let's get moving before it gets dark. We need to clean up a room for you. From here on out we'll have to rely on the oil lamps I brought, Dale Quicksilver said lightly as he looked at the setting Sunday. Sure, let's go. The three started to walk towards the Silver Silk Castle. Inside the castle's iron gate, Garen could see white ashes on the charred ground. It looked like the road was covered with a layer of soot. There were two small triangular fire towers on either side of the road, and there were two braziers on top of them. A metal railing separated the castle from the trees on the outside, but Garen had no idea out of what type of metal it was made from. Outside the railings, Garen could see fresh, dark green bushes. Beyond that, everything looked dead. The dying trees and withered lawn made Garen feel a bit depressed. The three people entered the gate holding their bags in hand. They followed the dusty road to the door of the castle. The wooden door had a metal frame around its perimeter, and there was a white keyhole in the middle. Dale Quicksilver took out the key and unlocked the door. The door opened and Garen followed Si Lan into the empty main hall. He checked around but there were no decorations, no furniture, not even a carpet. It was also dark since the wall lamps were also gone. The sunlight entered the hall through the dormer on the side, opposite to the door, and it made the hall just slightly more peaceful. Which room you want? You can pick one and then we need to start preparing dinner. Dale Quicksilver closed the door and put the key back to his belt. Cooking for myself in a castle in the middle of nowhere, this feels so novel to me, Garen said and smiled. Si Lan brought him to a room on the right side of the castle and made the bed for him. Garen put a blanket on the bed and was good to go. After dinner, Garen could barely see anything in the dark and they did not have enough oil to keep the lamps going, so they decided to go to bed early and explore the castle tomorrow. Garen went back to his room and sat on the bed. The room was extremely quiet. There was a door-sized window on one side, the floor was made from light red hexagonal tiles. There was only a large bed in the room, surrounded by metal racks upon which mosquito traps used to be placed. Garen could barely move on the bed as he did not want the rust to flake off the metal bed frame. There was an oil lamp on a chair beside the bed, the only thing that was keeping the room in light. He walked towards the window in his underwear and looked down. He could see nothing but darkness. He couldn't see anything on the lawn, the whole castle was dead still. Dale Quicksilver and Si Lan were sleeping in two different rooms. So Garen was the only one awake in the castle. Garen opened the window, and a chilling wind gusted into the room. Garen could hear owls hooting from the forest, barely illuminated by the shining moon in the sky. I should go to bed. I will see what Dale Quicksilver can find here tomorrow. I am not sure if he knows I am undercover. I don't know if he is a genius or not, but I know he's observant, Garen thought. He practiced some fist arts in the room, before closing the door, and laying down on the bed. After a while, Garen turned over on the bed. Strangely, he heard the sound of the door being opened. It sounded like someone had opened it from the outside. Surprised, he sat up and looked at the door. The door was ajar, but otherwise not moving. He got up and closed the door carefully. It was the wind, he thought. Garen lay down on the bed and fell asleep, but the sound of the door opening stopped him again. Garen woke up one more time and he grabbed the oil lamp by the side. He stared at the door carefully, but nothing was there. Are you playing with me? Garen yelled. Dale, he yelled again. His voice echoed in the room, down the grand hall across the castle, and finally back to him. But no one answered. It was still quiet outside. Garen put on his slippers and walked towards the door with the lamp in his hand. He closed the door again and locked it. He fastened the door with the latches so that no one would be able to open it again. Garen took a deep breath and returned to the bed. However, instead of sleeping, he just sat there and tried to figure out what was going on. Suddenly, he heard the sound of someone putting a key into the keyhole of his door. Garen stood up immediately and forcefully swung the door open. The noise stopped. No one was outside. He was really confused. I thought I locked it? Garen looked at the latches, and was surprised again. I locked the door and fastened all the latches, he yelled. He was sure he had locked the door, but the door had just opened without any resistance. What the hell? Garen yelled. He slammed the door closed and stepped back. His scalp tingled and he stumbled on the corner of the bed. If I find whoever it is that's pulling this prank, you're dead. Garen yelled with anger. Chapter 35, Silver Silk Castle, 3. Chapter 35, Silver Silk Castle, 3. Kelly. Wake up, Kelly. Come on. Upon hearing the sudden shout, Garen opened his eyes. The bright light in front of him forced his eyes into a tight squint. Dale. Quicksilver was anxiously tapping his face. What's going on? Why are you here, Dale? Garen sat up, realizing that the event that had just occurred was only a dream. Why are you asleep down here in the basement? Dale looked at Garen curiously. Were you here looking for something by yourself and ended up falling asleep? Didn't I tell you to wait for me to move together? At this moment, Garen found himself lying against the wall in the basement. Dark and narrow walls made from cold stone bricks surrounded him. The room was completely empty. The basement was partially underground. Sunlight spilled in from a window near the ceiling, making this place resemble a dungeon more than a basement. What's going on? I clearly remember going to sleep in the bedroom. He lowered his head as a wave of excruciating pain rose. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. The sound of silence greeted him. In the blink of an eye, Dale Quicksilver had vanished right in front of him. The room was empty again. Dale! Dale! Garen crawled up from the floor and yelled again. There was no answer. A sharp pain arose from within his head once more, and then he remembered, Dale had woken him up from the basement. That had happened 3 days ago. 3 days ago. He covered his head, his vision blurry. What happened? If that was 3 days ago, what was I doing in these past 3 days? How come I don't remember anything? He was right here in front of me. He felt the pain assault his temples again. His mind was in chaos. No, I can't stay in this castle any longer. He pushed open the door and rushed out of the basement, running toward the castle's gate through a straight and empty path. His footsteps echoed inside the castle. Peng! The castle door was slammed open. He then stumbled through the door and fell down the stairs, tumbling onto the grass. Gasp! He lied on the grass, breathless, gasping for air. Suddenly, he felt a sense of drowsiness encroaching upon him. Unable to resist the drowsiness, he passed out. Not knowing how long it has been, he slowly opened his eyes. He was still lying on his bed inside the castle. Kelly, are you up yet? Dale Quicksilver's voice came from outside. I'm back here again? Was that all a dream? Garen sat up from the bed. This place is too strange. Goosebumps formed all over his body. Even though sunlight was shining on him through the bedroom window, he didn't feel any warmth. Thinking back, the images in this room seemed more real than those in his dreams. Was it all a dream? He took a deep breath. After getting up, he quickly dressed up and opened the door. Dale Quicksilver was standing there with a surprised look. What's wrong? You look like you stayed up all night. It's nothing, just a nightmare. Garen forced out a smile. Nightmare? Dale Quicksilver laughed. A nightmare could scare you like this? What happened in it? Come, tell us and grab some breakfast. Fine. Garen rubbed his eyebrows. He knew it was ridiculous. Although that nightmare was unbelievably real. You go down first, in the main hall downstairs. I'll lock the doors. Dale Quicksilver tapped Garen's shoulder. Seems like I shouldn't have shown you that document. It's okay, I'm not so easily frightened. Garen laughed and left for breakfast. He didn't notice Dale Quicksilver's gloomy expression behind him. Main hall. Garen followed the stairs down to find Si Lan sitting in the corner of the hall. She was drinking a cup of tea, wearing a dark brown hunting uniform. Her blonde ponytail hung from her back, contrasting against her clear skin. Mr. Kelly is up too? You don't look too well. Did you not have a good rest? I had a nightmare, it was too real. Garen rubbed between his eyes and sat down at the table. Have some tea. I got it from the Garfield province. Si Lan made an inviting gesture. Thanks. Garen lifted a cup of hot black tea and put it up to his nose, smelling the fresh minty scent mixed with a hint of milk cream. He sipped from the cup and found that the tea tasted like mint water. What kind of tea is this? Tastes a little weird. I've added some other spices so it will help you wake up. One of my uncles is a doctor at Sirius University and he taught me how to make this, Si Lan said. Garen nodded. Not bad, I'm already feeling better. Dale Quicksilver came to the table and sat down as well. He took a cup of tea and chugged the tea down his throat. So here's the plan, We'll go hunting first, get the food for lunch and dinner, then get some water and clean our equipment. Then we'll spend the rest of the afternoon investigating the castle and its surroundings. You're the expert, you make the plans. Garin shrugged. Oh, and Mr. Kelly. Just call me Kelly. All right, Kelly. You said you had a vivid nightmare. Just what kind of nightmare could it be to have exhausted and dispirited you so? Garin drank some hot tea, allowing the hot water, combined with the cool mint flavor, to bathe his throat. The tea flowed into his stomach, filling his body with warmth, and sobered his mind. I dreamed. He paused for a second, of someone opening my door at night, over and over again every time when I'm about to fall asleep. His eyebrows furrowed. This is very strange. I've never been here before, so I didn't expect to have this kind of dream on my first night. I remember the documents I showed you contained information about the deaths of the 3 owners of this castle. It was mentioned that the previous 3 owners all had nightmares before their deaths. Maybe you were worried after reading that document, causing you to have a nightmare, Dale Quicksilver analyzed. Do we have information on what their nightmares were about? We don't know anything about that. I had a dream last night as well. It wasn't a nightmare though. Dale Quicksilver looked up through the window. His expression told Garin he was reminiscing about something. You are thinking about it again? Si Lan seemed worried. It's been that long, yet you still can't let it go. If only it was that easy, Dale Quicksilver laughed, somewhat bitterly. Garin was completely silent, carefully watching their expressions. After the morning tea, they had some breakfast. The 3 of them went to prepare their weapons and gear. Dale Quicksilver held a rifle and suited up in a military hunting uniform with a top hat. Garin had a half-meter-long saber and wore the same clothes he had on the day before, which were completely unsuitable for the occasion. In the end, he also grabbed a sack, ready to help with logistics. They cleaned up the dishes and headed out of the castle. After locking the door, Dale Quicksilver led them toward the right side of the castle. There's a hole in the fence. We can get to the forest through there. He loaded the rifle as he spoke. There aren't many animals around here. It's a good thing we don't have many mouths to feed. Even small prey would be enough for a few meals. Garin nodded in reply. He didn't speak, but instead raised the sack in his hand, indicating that he was going to be taking care of the prey. The rest was on Quicksilver. Dale Quicksilver laughed and tapped his rifle without saying a word. The 3 arrived at the right wing of the castle. Located on the black steel fence was a giant hole as wide as 2 people. The poles on the fence had been destroyed by some force, bent inwards haphazardly. Dale Quicksilver carefully sneaked past the gap and waved from the other side. Si Lan and Garin followed him through the hole, and Garin almost caught his clothes on the fence. Outside the fence was a dark and green forest. Trees around 4 to 5 meters tall filled the area, while thick and wild bushes scattered around the ground. A cold aura could be felt emitting from deep inside even before they entered. The morning sunlight could not pierce through the dense leaves. Even the warmth could not penetrate through. The sounds of birds chirping continuously came from within the forest, with the occasional noises coming from the bushes as something moved inside. That's the noise of mountain mice, sounds like big ones. Dale Quicksilver lowered his voice and crouched down, trying not to make any noise. I didn't expect to have something good this quick. Si Lan smiled while moving behind Dale. Even if Garin had never hunted before, he knew not to make a sound at this moment. He tipped his toes and followed behind. Bang! Garin looked forward and saw Dale Quicksilver lower his rifle, smoke snaking from the barrels with the smell of gunpowder permeating through the air. Your aim is pretty good, Dale. How did you hit it so accurately through all that grass? The mouse was moving so fast. Garen gave him a thumbs up and said, "Looks like we'll have enough food for today." "That's not enough at all. We'll have to gut it and skin it. After that, there would hardly be any meat left." "We'll need some more, Dale," Quicksilver said, shaking his head. Garen had never hunted wild animals before. Although he didn't know what was going on, he was fascinated by everything. His bad mood from last night's nightmare improved. The three continued to wander inside the forest. Garen followed behind with the giant mountain mouse in his sack. It was quite heavy. Around 20 pounds. While walking behind Lan, Garen checked his attribute pain. The attributes had not changed much, although his strength did grow a tiny bit from the original 2.08 to 2.09. This was mostly as a result of his White Cloud secret arts. Many people know about the effects of the level 3 White Cloud secret arts, but no one has reached level 4 before. I don't think anyone knows what kind of effect it will have. My martial arts are heading on the right path now, but my potential meter stopped growing again. If only I could find the reason behind the increase of potential from the antiques of tragedy, I will have a direction to look in. Instead of blindly blundering everywhere like I'm currently doing. Garen reflected on his current situation while closely following behind Dale and Lan. These few days, due to his combat training with his senior brother and sister, he had grown to resemble a real martial artist. This was a change from within, a natural change, caused by his increase in strength and experience. After a while, with no new prey in sight, Dale Quicksilver turned around and shouted, "There's a castle dungeon in the front. Do you want to go check it out? Since we are already close, we can go there to take a break." I think the gunshot had scared the other animals. There's nothing to hunt around anymore. Chapter 36, Silver Silk Castle, 4. Chapter 36, Silver Silk Castle, 4. A dungeon? Sure, your call. The group continued wandering through the forest after Dale Quicksilver found the marking he made on a tree from before. After being led by a few more of these markings, they arrived at an area of open ground. "This is it. Last time I was here, we even had a barbecue at this place." Dale Quicksilver laughed as he strode on the grassland. His facial expression, however, suddenly changed after stomping on the ground a couple of times. "Something's different, someone has been here already." Lan hurried to him. She bent down and started fumbling around the ground. Soon enough, she pulled out a metal ring from the soil. It was a dark red ring, corrupted by rust resulting from the long passage of time. The color of rust greatly contrasted with its true hue, which showed a glint of silver. Dale Quicksilver, who had also been searching on the ground, rushed to Lan immediately after she found the ring. There, a square wooden cellar door revealed itself as it was pulled up. Chunks of grass and dirt slid off the surface, revealing a dark hole underneath. Garen didn't ask how Dale Quicksilver knew that someone had been here, but seeing the expressions of the other two, he felt a bit nervous as well. He walked up to the edge and looked down. The hole was deep and pitch black. "I'll go take a look." Surprisingly, Lan was the first to volunteer, not Dale Quicksilver. "Be safe," the detective unexpectedly answered her. He nodded at her with a respectful expression. "Let me go down instead, this is not a job for a lady," Garen said, feeling hesitant. "It's fine, Lan isn't your usual lady, just watch out for her," detective answered calmly. Lan pulled out a white bandana out of nowhere and tied it around her face to cover her nose. She pulled out her black dagger, secured a rope to a nearby tree, and threw the other end of the rope down the hole. "I'll go down first, You guys watch out up here. The trace is fresh, so the person may not be far from here. Si Lan warned them. We got it, take care of yourself. The detective pulled Garin 2 steps back, his face even more serious. Si Lan grabbed the rope and jumped down, quickly disappearing into the darkness. The rope instantly became taut. 10 seconds later, it became loose again, signifying Si Ian's successful landing. Sir, you better come down as well, there's something wrong here. Si Ian's voice came from below. Dale Quicksilver's stony face turned even darker. If Si Lan is calling for help, it must be very serious. I have to go down myself. Mr. Kelly, the task of guarding this place is on you now. I'll leave this rifle to you, please don't go anywhere. Garin was slightly surprised. He didn't know why Dale Quicksilver trusted him so much. However, he still agreed. He still needed something from the detective, so it would be unwise to have any funny ideas right now. Don't you worry, I won't move an inch. Dale Quicksilver nodded. He handed the rifle to Garin and fixed his belt, organizing the items he had on him. He then slid down the rope into the dungeon. After about 10 seconds, he was not visible from above ground anymore. Garin stood alone next to the cellar door. Holding the double-barreled pipe rifle, he was on high alert. Fortunately, there was no movement around him except for the tree leaves rustling as they blew in the wind. After a short while, Si Lan climbed out of the hole with a dirty and tired face. There are 2 corpses down there. It seems they have been rotting for some time already. Corpses? Garin faked a surprised expression and gulped. Ms. Si Lan, you're not joking, are you? In fact, he had already either directly or indirectly killed 2 people, and after comprehending his school's teachings regarding the heart, his mind had become calm and fearless. 2 corpses no longer frightened him. No joke, there are 2 men's bodies down there. Si Lan sat on the grass and stabbed her dagger into the ground next to her. She took out a white handkerchief with a fading red handprint. What is this? This handkerchief has the perpetrator's bloody handprint, this is an important piece of the puzzle. She carefully folded the handkerchief and kept it inside a small pocket. These were taken from inside the dungeon. As skilled as Mr. Dale might be, he couldn't identify them either. She pulled out a few pieces of black objects covered in mud. He said that this might be an antique. He is still examining the area, so he asked me to bring this to you first. Oh. Garin carefully received the objects and peeled off the mud on them. Soon, 4 small objects were laid on the grass. They were 4 small iron plates about the size of a knuckle, each of them rectangular shaped. These 4 objects were thick, and had some indistinct letters carved on them. Well? Si Lan asked. This antique is useful, quite useful for me. Garin's face twitched for a second, but it quickly returned back to normal. He said that if you like them, you can keep them as a reward for this unpleasant journey. Garin touched one of the plates. He felt the same chi from the emblem, and he shook his head. I'm sure Dale knows how valuable these iron plates are. This reward is too much compared to my work, but I'll have to accept it. He couldn't put them down since he had them in his hand. Garin glanced at Si Lan, only to see her looking at him with a faint smile, which in turn caused Garin to blush. He could not refuse. If he could absorb all of the potential inside these plates, he was certain of having an increment of 10 points in his attribute. He had a feeling that this could even be an antique that supplied continuous chi just like the emblem. This gift is a little too heavy. He gripped the iron plate in his hand. The sensation was akin to one directly holding an ice cube. A biting chill permeated his hand as though it was beginning to freeze his skin, yet it hadn't done so in reality. This speed of absorption is too slow, it will take months before I could absorb them all. Garen looked at Si Lan, his eyes squinting. I have a check for $1 million. He took out a bank check from his chest pocket, neatly folded it and placed it next to the plates. If I identified it correctly, this plate is the black jade disc Dale mentioned earlier. A while ago, this disc was auctioned for the price of $6 million in the Weisman Empire. It's still quite a bargain for me. He paused for a second, feeling hesitant about something. I'll take it this time, but I owe Dale a big favor. He gave her his solemn word. Even in his former life, Garen was one who valued his own promises. Once he swore an oath, he would always honor it and keep his promise. This plate was like a great treasure for him. What it brought was not only wealth, but also the enhancement of his attributes. As long as he kept it close to him, it was bound to bring great improvement to his overall strength. He could probably catch up to his senior brothers and senior sister, and even surpassing his master Fei Biun, achieving a great leap in strength in an extremely short period. Mr. Dale knew you would accept it, and luckily, you can do him a favor right now to repay him. It was as though Si Lan had already expected Garen's response. What does he want me to do? I'll do everything in my power to help him. Garen's pupils shrank slightly, knowing that Dale Quicksilver might have seen through his cover. Stop the approaching golden hoop. Ian's eyes turned fierce, and she said in a low voice, if you can delay him for half an hour, our help will be here. Of course, it would be better if you killed him. Golden hoop. Garen turned around to look to his right. A man wearing a camouflage suit along with face covered with black bandana, and had a golden ring hanging from his right ear was approaching in the grassland. You guys hunted me last time, but now, it's time for me to hunt you instead. The man's voice was hoarse, which sounded grating and harsh. At this moment, Dale Quicksilver climbed out of the hole, panting as he glanced at Golden Hoop. It's on you, Kelly. He tapped Garen's shoulder and made an eye gesture to Si Lan. The two turned around and escaped toward the castle. Without looking back. Sir, that Kelly. Can he really stop the Golden Hoop? Gasp, gasp, as long as he can hold him for a little while. I never expected him to stop Golden Hoop to begin with. Dale Quicksilver gasped as he ran. The black jade disc I left to him is for trading his life, and by Golden Hoop's rules, he won't take Kelly's life. So you had all of this planned out, huh? Si Lan was only slightly panting, her stamina seemingly unabated. Let's keep running, Golden Hoop will catch up to us soon. Gale Quicksilver said as he climbed through the hole in the fence. Inside the forest, Garen collected the black jade disc and slowly stood up. His bones made a series of loud cracking noises. I owe Dale a big favor, and killing you will repay it. Don't blame me, blame your own misfortune. His body swelled up like an air balloon with his height growing from 1.7 meters to over 2 meters. A strong and violent aura began to emanate from him. His muscles and skin turned from pale white to a leather-like black color. Golden Hoop's expression changed. Under the strong force of Garen's aura, he was pushed back 2 steps. Who the hell are you? Garen didn't answer. Instead, he flexed his arms and reached toward Golden Ring with a grasping motion. His fearsome and muscular arms coiled with purple veins clawed toward Golden Hoop's head as he crossed a few meters in milliseconds. Chapter 37, Leave, 1. Chapter 37, Leave, 1. With a sudden and violent attack, Garen's arm caught the tip of Golden Hoop's head and like the giant claws of a vicious beast he clasped it tightly as if he were going to crush it. This was the acceleration technique of the White Cloud secret method. Combined with any other action, it could achieve the effect of instantaneous acceleration to create a sudden attack. This was the first time Garen had used White Cloud combat arts in a real battle. White Cloud combat arts required an imposing momentum to it. Every single action had to exhibit a crushing force. When his palm was about to catch Golden Hoop's forehead, Golden Hoop produced a dagger out of nowhere and stabbed upwards, aiming for Garen's wrist. The move was swift and agile. The tip of the dagger seemed to instantly accelerate, as if some special force technique was used. Whack! Garen turned his palm sideways to avoid the blade, then he hit Golden Hoop's wrist with the side of his palm. With a swoosh, the dagger flew out of his hand and landed in the bushes. Golden Hoop took the opportunity to back up a few steps, opening up some distance between them. You think you can win by force? Fool! Golden Hoop reached his right hand behind his waist, and suddenly, 4 small black throwing knives were flung towards Garen. Swoosh! 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 The 4 throwing knives flew out in a flash and accurately struck onto Garen's chest. Garen didn't manage to respond in time. He wanted to cross his arms to protect his chest, but when he raised his arms, the throwing knives had already pierced his clothes. The throwing knives merely ripped his clothes and were nailed to his skin, but they didn't cut through the skin. He grabbed one of the knives and threw it at Golden Hoop. A violent whirling sound followed. The throwing knife turned into a round disc and flew straight at Golden Hoop, but he evaded it with ease. Garen flung the 3 remaining knives in succession, but they were all casually avoided by Golden Hoop. This time, Garen took the opportunity to pick up the double-barreled rifle while Golden Hoop was distracted. Bang! White smoke came out of the barrels as the shot hit a tree trunk and left a blackened dent. Some leaves and bark fell off the tree like raindrops from the force of the blast. Golden Hoop was extremely fast. He started dodging once Garen showed signs of his next actions, which made him impossible to aim at. After a few evasions, he seemed to realize that Garen's reactions were not as quick as his, and his eyes narrowed into a sneer. His astonishment at Garen's physical change earlier instantly faded. I thought you wanted to kill me? Do you think you can? Go to hell! Garen roared. He raised the double-barreled shotgun and flung it at Golden Hoop like an iron bar. Garen's force caused the gun to give a loud, piercing whistle in mid-air. This was to no avail either. Golden Hoop turned his body to the right and easily avoided it. What's the use of having a ton of strength? If you can't hit me, it's all in vain, Golden Hoop jeered. With yet another dagger in hand, his body suddenly drew close. He did a slight flick with the dagger, then stabbed towards Garen's wrist. Angled upwards, this stab was quick and precise. He had targeted the moment when Garen's large range of motion created some space. It's over. A trace of malice flashed across Golden Hoop's eyes. At this instant, Garen squinted as he swung his right arm backwards, avoiding the dagger in a flash. The slow pace he had a while ago had seemingly transformed. His right arm flung out like a rubber hose at a lightning pace and hit Golden Hoop's left arm. The speed of this attack was different from before. Only a glimpse of a shadow could be seen from the swinging arm. His speed had almost doubled. Golden Hoop stared wide-eyed. His dagger was only halfway through the stab when he felt a crack in his right arm, which was then followed by a burst of pain. Suddenly, his body turned light as it involuntarily leapt towards the right. Wham! Golden Hoop crashed into the bushes. After some ruffling, he created a trail in the shrubbery, trampling over a large amount of plant and leaves. He went on for a good 7 to 8 meters before colliding against a large white rock. Garen stayed put and didn't give chase. As his body gradually restored to its original state, he shook his right arm a little as a relaxed smile broke across his face. You really thought I was slow? Even though I'm not as fast as you, I'm not that slow. I deliberately said I wanted to kill you first, Then acted like a clumsy doofus. All of it was to lure you to stay and duel with me, and to make you think that you could get rid of me easily. Without wasting too much time, with the added benefit of relieving yourself of your hatred towards me. Too bad. He slowly walked over. He saw Golden Hoop try to hold his body up from the ground, but his every attempt was met with the same result. He kept falling flat every time. It wasn't just his right arm. When he was stumbling through the bushes, it was obvious that there was an unnatural distortion in his left arm. It was broken. I am not as fast as you. If you ignored me and directly pursued Dale Quicksilver and his companion, then I wouldn't have been able to stop you. Good thing you were agitated by me enough to stay put. It was the first time he had used the combat arts strategy taught by Fei Baiyun in an actual combat. The fact that it worked like a charm gave him an immense sense of relief. Golden Hoop's face was livid. Fresh blood slowly dripped from the bottom half of his body. He must have cut himself somewhere when he was stumbling through the bushes. You got hit by 4 of my knives, but you weren't, cough, cough, weren't even injured. Even so, don't get too cocky. Someone will avenge me. Upon finishing the sentence, purple blood instantly spilled from the corner of his mouth. His head bent askew, his eyes clouded over, and he eventually stopped breathing. Garen squinted and quickly crouched down to apply pressure on Golden Hoop's chest. His body was still warm, but his heartbeat had stopped. Dead? The infamous thief, Golden Hoop, can't possibly die so easily from my trickery, can he? He felt that it was all too simple. Golden Hoop and Dale Quicksilver had been battling wits for a few years. If he could so easily be dispatched, he should have disappeared. Ages ago it wouldn't be up to Garen to do it. Garen gave a puff as he stood up and surveyed his surroundings. The forest was quiet, only the fluttering of tree leaves blown by the wind could be heard. He crouched down again and started examining Golden Hoop's belongings and clothing. The man had nothing on him except some money and throwing knives. Looking at the cloth covering Golden Hoop's face, Garen frowned. When he removed it, he was instantly shocked at what he saw. Under the mask was a half-burnt face with a black scar of the number 102 on his right cheek, as if he was branded. 102? Looks like Golden Hoop is not a person, it's an organization. Garen suddenly felt that things had become more complicated. That means there is probably someone else pursuing Dale Quicksilver and S.I. Lan. This guy was just a decoy. He stood up, mindfully examined his surroundings, then quickly ran towards the direction of the castle. This Golden Hoop is just an ordinary person with some training in combat arts. Most people could easily impersonate him with a bit of practice. He just knew some explosive speed force technique. The real Golden Hoop wouldn't be so simple. Recalling the 102 on that man's face, Garen felt a heavy weight in his heart. If that number represents a rank or a serial code, that means Golden Hoop is an organization with more than 100 members. So, why would such a big organization dedicate itself to stealing antiques? Purely for profit? Or is there another purpose? From how Dale Quicksilver casually gifted him the black jade disc, it showed that he didn't know what that meant to Garen. He probably thought that Garen had great skill and also liked antiques. Valuable antiques of tragedy like the black jade disc were absolutely irresistible for such a collector. But that was Kelly the collector, a fake persona. The real Garen was, in fact, merely a high school student. The thought of facing a murderous evil organization like Golden Hoop alone made Garen uneasy, even though he had been training in martial arts for so long. Although he had lived for decades in his past life and he wasn't actually a teenage high school student, that life was led in a lawful and socially stable environment. He quickly ran back. Soon, he was in front of the hole in the castle fence. Garin hurried through the hole before turning to a corner and heading towards the main gate of the castle. Suddenly, he glimpsed a flash of light to his right. He stopped in his tracks. He focused his gaze towards the direction of the light, and he could vaguely make out a black telescope withdraw into the trees in a distance. The flash of light earlier was the reflection of sunlight off the lens of the telescope. I didn't think there would be someone surveilling. That means my every move has been monitored. Garin was stunned. No wonder Mr. 102 said someone would avenge him. This is troublesome. He thought he had killed that person in the forest without being seen, and his organization shouldn't have noticed him. Now, he realized. This thought was too naive. I'll just have to find Dale Quicksilver and S.I. Land first, then figure it out from there. To be marked by the organization but still remain unclear about the situation, that's courting death. He walked around the side of the castle to the front gates. The castle gates were ajar. It was unusually quiet inside. He couldn't hear the voices of Dale Quicksilver and Miss S.I. Lan. Garin quickly walked through the gates. In the castle hall, the previously set white-colored wooden coffee table had been overturned, and the tea from a glass pot had spilled all over. A clutter of footprints could be faintly seen all around the floor, as if a lot of people had rushed past this place. Garin briefly scanned the footprints. Most of them were moist black footprints, with some green moss mixed into them. Someone was here, and they were not alone. He lightened his footsteps as he crept up to the first floor, then he started patrolling the corridors. The castle walls and floor were covered in burnt ash, the type that was white with some black mixed inside, like black and white paint that wasn't fully blended. Remnants of half-burnt oil paintings still hung on some parts of the walls along the corridor. Walking towards Dale Quicksilver's bedroom, Garin tried to breathe as softly as possible, all the while listening for movement within the castle. It seemed like he was alone in the entire castle. There was no sound. The air was filled with a dead silence and desolation. Soon, he reached the entrance of Dale Quicksilver's bedroom. The iron door was ajar. Garin gently pushed it open and went in through the gap without making too much noise. There was a white bed in the room, a single sofa, and a large rectangular crate. The thick curtains covered most of the windows, only allowing a ray of light to shine in through a small part. The whole bedroom was eclipsed in shadow, and it seemed dark inside. The crate was placed at the end of the bed, an oil lamp was still alight on top of it. The dim light from the oil lamp illuminated the parts of the room eclipsed by the shadow of the curtains. Chapter 38, Leave, 2. Chapter 38, Leave, 2. 382. Garin treaded lightly into the room. The stale and depressing air made him feel slightly uneasy. This room is too quiet. He could not hear any movement. The windows seemed to have particularly good soundproofing, insulating the room from the outside. Sounds of birds chirping and the wind blowing. The whole room was oppressively silent, as if there had been someone resting here moments ago who left in an instant. Garin slowly walked to the large package at the end of the bed. He was suddenly curious about Dale Quicksilver's large crate. I thought he said he didn't bring much kerosene? Why is the lamp lit in the daytime? He reached out to pick up the kerosene lamp. Creak. The sound came from the door behind him. Startled, Garin turned around to see that the door had closed on its own and had been locked from the outside when he was not looking. He strode over and tried to turn the doorknob, but it kept clicking without turning. He could hear the footsteps of someone outside running away hastily along the corridor. Garin's face sank. This place is strange indeed. Suddenly, he recalled the information that Dale Quicksilver had showed him. The detective had annotated his key analyses at the end of the material. There was one common factor on the bodies of the victims in the mysterious deaths of the 3 previous masters of Silver Silk Castle. They were all wearing the bronze cross emblem handed down to them by their ancestors. According to legend, this emblem was a second-tier military medal awarded during wartime for meritorious achievement. But in fact, according to my research, the masters of the castle had obtained this emblem as early as 200 years ago, so it couldn't have been something awarded during the war which occurred later. At this thought, Garin quickly pulled out the black thread around his neck. A magenta emblem hung on the thread with a letter P in the middle. It was the bronze cross emblem that he always had on him. The color of the emblem seemed brighter now, like it had just been polished. There was no sign of it being time-worn. This is indeed the problem. Garin's expression was somber as he glanced around the entire bedroom. He yanked the emblem off his neck, put it into the crate, closed the lid, then rushed to the window in a few strides. Crash! He smashed the window with his fist. All of a sudden, the whole bedroom seemed as if had escaped from a silent film. As though someone had turned off the mute button. Everything livened up in an instant. Garin had a spooky feeling in his heart, as if danger was rapidly approaching, and he subconsciously did not want to leave through the door. He stood by the window and looked down. This was the second floor, more than 10 meters away from the grass lawn. I need to get some bed sheets to make a rope. It's quite high from up here. As he was about to turn around, he suddenly felt someone push him hard from behind. The force was stronger than his could muster. Even in his current state. Uncontrollably, Garin fell straight out of the window. "Who?" he roared. His mind blanked and his whole body was extremely tense. He. A faint laughter came from behind. Bam! Garin stretched his arms out to cushion his body against the grass. Fortunately, he had a very good physique and he was strong enough. His arms merely suffered from slight dislocation due to the trauma of the fall and his poor arm positioning. He rolled over and got up quickly, then turned to look up at the bedroom on the second floor. The curtains were fluttering in the wind, but no one was there. He took a look at the castle gates, but they were now locked shut. The gates that were ajar earlier were now locked. From the outside, Garin resisted the pain from his shoulder dislocations, took a long look at the castle, then turned around to sprint into the distance. He passed the castle fence, but did not show any signs of stopping. He headed directly along the mountain trail that he had come from, rushing to Canoe Town. From that push earlier, an ordinary person definitely would have been killed by the fall. In that position, falling head first, the neck would have snapped. If I wasn't someone trained in martial arts, I would have been crippled even if I survived. Garin still had a lingering unease. Fortunately, he didn't go up to inspect the third-floor bedroom. If he had fallen down from the third floor. Recalling the report on the previous 3 masters of the castle, there were multiple incidents in the records about servants falling out of windows to their deaths while cleaning the rooms. I thought those were accidents, possibly due to a flaw in the castle design. But now it seems that they must have been pushed like me. Garin felt sure of it because the servants had all fallen head first to their deaths, the exact posture they would have been in if they were pushed. As the pain from his shoulders grew, Garin rolled up his sleeves to take a look. They had swollen into a red mass. I need to hurry into town to get treated. His pace accelerated. Snap! Ouch! Garin's left shoulder was swollen like a red pastry bun. Baring his upper body, he was sitting at the pub where he previously had tea with Dale Quicksilver. A doctor in a grey suit was sitting beside him. He grabbed Garin's left arm and forcefully shifted it back into place. Garin instantly gasped as the pain made his whole body sweat. A crisp crack came from his joints. Done, it's relocated. Thank you very much, Dr. Ash. Garin nodded, then took out a stack of cash notes with his freshly relocated right arm and put it on the table. Money for the treatment. Very well. Dr. Ash was the veteran healer in town who often treated the locals. Although he lacked a formal license to practice medicine, his bone manipulation skills were very reliable. After all, in small towns like these, most patients were afflicted with similar minor ailments. Once he arrived back in town, Garin had immediately paid the townsfolk to call for Dr. Ash. Now his dislocated shoulder is fixed. I'll prescribe you some medicine. Apply a little to the injuries every day according to the dosage on the label and you'll recover in no time. Dr. Ash took the money, smiled, and said, "It's rare to encounter a major patient like you. I'll gladly take this $1,000. You deserve it. After all, I woke you from your afternoon nap for treatment. Think of the extra money as compensation for your troubles." Garin nodded indifferently. "Sorry to have inconvenienced you." "Not at all, not at all." Ash rummaged through his portable small white medicine box and took out a milky white glass vial, then put it on the table after checking the label. "This is the ointment that you have to apply every day. Remember not to be too vigorous and you should be fine. I'll take my leave first." Garin nodded. "Thanks." He watched as Ash carried his medicine box and left, walking along a narrow path before disappearing past the bushes. Garin sat at the table, gently lifted the wooden cup, and downed the coffee inside. "Boss, another cup," he turned and shouted into the small building. "Of course." A plump middle-aged man with a black beard came out, carrying a glass coffee pot. He carefully poured Garin a fresh cup of coffee. At that moment, two fit-looking farmers carrying hoes walked in and plopped down at one of the tables. "2 beers please." The boss hurried inside and carried some beer out. Garin sat in place, sensing the constant cool flow of energy from the black jade disc that he had just acquired. For a moment, the pain in his shoulders seemed to have diminished. When he was training at the dojo with the seniors, shoulder dislocations were a common occurrence. He could still handle the pain and did not find it too unbearable, so it did not really affect his normal activities. While sitting in this small pub, he had recovered enough to re-evaluate Dale Quicksilver's actions. Putting aside the oddities of the castle itself, I didn't expect Dale Quicksilver to leave the case and deliberately live in a small castle in the countryside for so long. It's unusual no matter how you think about it. Garin took a sip of the coffee. But from another perspective, some people from the Golden Hoop had appeared around the castle. Assuming Silver Silk Castle was their intended target, Dale Quicksilver might have been after them instead of the castle. Then it all makes sense. Golden Hoop's target is Silver Silk Castle. Dale Quicksilver tracked them because of the case, and out of random luck I got mixed up in all of it. As someone whose identity is unclear, letting me face the Golden Hoop was a way to test if I was a spy sent by them. There's probably more to it, but that should be the gist of it. If that's the case, where is Dale Quicksilver now? Garin subconsciously wanted to rub his eyebrows, but couldn't raise his shoulder. A piercing pain followed and he let out a wry smile. Nearing noon, the sun turned red. Business in the pub improved as more and more people came in and the boss brought a few more chairs and tables out to accommodate. Noise filled the entire pub as farmers and townspeople ate, drank, and conversed loudly. Garin moved to sit alone in a corner. Unlike the rowdy crowd, he sat quietly on a chair drinking his coffee. "Boss, mind if I ask you something?" Garin called out when the boss passed him. "What is it, sir?" The plump boss stopped in his tracks. He remembered that this Mr. Kelly was the one who had tea here previously with the gentleman with extraordinary flair. Customers with such elegance were not something the average townsfolk could match up to, so he treated them with a careful attitude. "I'd like to ask whether the man who had tea with me yesterday has come back to the town yet?" Garin inquired casually with a whisper. With the detective experience that Dale Quicksilver had, if he intended to hide, he wouldn't allow himself to be so easily discovered by someone like the boss. He has. He even came here for tea earlier today, the plump boss answered quickly. He didn't expect the boss to react immediately and answer him so definitively. He's back. Garen was stunned. Did he have anything to say? Oh, no, he didn't. He merely ordered the same black tea as you had yesterday and sat in the exact same place, the boss replied quickly. I see. Garen nodded thoughtfully. Obviously, this spot was a clue that Dale Quicksilver had intentionally left for him, but Garen did not intend to find Dale at the moment. Seems like getting myself mixed up with this detective has been somewhat detrimental. It's better if we go our separate ways. If what Dale said is true, then he's tracking the antiques of tragedy and the secret contained within. If that's the case, I can follow in his footsteps. Anyway, since it would be difficult to find the antiques of tragedy using the normal routes. If my speculation proves accurate, coupled with the fact that the Golden Hoop seems to be searching for the same thing, both of them could help me track down the antiques of tragedy. I'll just have to find the right opportunity to approach them and exchange something for it. Garen made preliminary plans for what was to come. Although it had been dangerous, he had managed to benefit. Even though he lost the bronze cross emblem, he acquired the black jade disc. The latter was much more valuable since it still had potential left to be absorbed. Chapter 39, Felicity, 1. Chapter 39, Felicity, 1. When he reached the city from Canoe Town, it was past 8 o'clock at night. Garen headed straight home, washed up, and went to bed. His parents were not home. They were probably at some work gathering together. His sister Ying who was reading on the sofa, raised the book to cover her face when she saw him come in. He couldn't figure out what was up with her. Garen still felt some pain from his shoulder dislocation even though he had applied the ointment. Coupled with everything that happened at the castle today, he was too physically and mentally exhausted to take notice. He had been resting at home for a week. The swelling in his shoulder had reduced, but he still couldn't do exercises that were too intense, including training in martial arts. Garen couldn't bear to stay at home any longer. His sister was always sulking and didn't talk to him. Things like computers and television, which could occupy free time, did not exist in this era and world. He took a little change with him and went directly to the library in the city. This is your library card. Keep it properly, and don't wear out the serial number. The receptionist at the lobby service counter handed a black square card over to him with both hands, a smile on her face. Thank you. Garen took the card and glanced at the serial number, 233. Is the serial number based on the number of people? Yes, it is, sir. The receptionist nodded. Turn left for general reading, and head right for classics, rare books, and the special and foreign language collections. Okay. Holding the card, Garen directly headed down the left corridor. It was slightly dark inside the black corridor. On the walls on both sides were yellow wall lamps that dimly lit the whole corridor. Only after entering the corridor did he notice two young girls walking in front of him, one in front of the other. The ground was covered with thick black carpet. There was almost no sound of footsteps. There are too few people, mainly because it's too expensive. $5,000 for a card, someone has to introduce you, and you're only allowed to loan for a month. Most of the people who are really interested in coming here to read can't afford it, and the people who can just don't have the time. Nodding slightly, Garen followed them for a distance and turned left into a small, narrow room. The room was illuminated with a pale yellow light. All the walls were covered by bookshelves, and the densely arranged red-covered books had completely blocked the walls behind. In the room were two single red sofas and a black wooden table full of books. Looking straight across from the entrance, there was a door on the opposite wall that led to another room similar to this one, and there was another door opposite of that room, connected to the new room. The rooms linked into a straight line like meat on a kebab, door to door, until they reach a corner at the far end. Guests could walk in a straight line through all of the rooms. The two girls walking in front of Garin didn't stop. They kept walking on until they stood in front of the third room. Garin retracted his line of sight and scanned the books on the walls. Wooden category signs hung below the wall lamps. The books in this room were history books. He kept walking on through to the next room. The second room was geography. The third room was dance, drama, and illustration arts. The two girls weren't pretty, but as they stood there with a book in each hand, they looked quite ecstatic. The fourth room was mathematics, chemistry, and philosophy. The fifth room was marriage, sex, and health care. In fact, it was the place where they stored those books. The culture in the Confederation was influenced by the Weismann Empire. It was very liberal. Even though there weren't many of these types of books, but they could be publicly published. Inside the room, a 30-odd-year-old woman sat on the sofa immersed in her reading. In the sixth room, once he stepped in, Garin noticed a girl in a white skirt with black lace sitting on the sofa. Her pale blonde hair was draped behind her with a white hairband tied in the middle. She looked extremely ladylike. "Felicity? You're here today too?" Garin was slightly surprised but instantly laughed. He walked to the girl and sat down beside her on the sofa. "What a coincidence." The girl looked up, showing her delicate and pure face. She had porcelain white skin which had a slightly translucent quality to it. Her eyes were big and clear, the dark blue irises focused coolly on Garin. She gave off the impression of a cool young girl, completely different from the arrogant rich girl at the riverside picnic. This was her in real life, the mild side that only showed when around recognized friends. Felicity sat on a wide comfy sofa. Her petite frame almost sank into it, enveloped by the sofa's redness. She had a large red-covered book on her lap. The book covered most of her upper body, which made her look dainty and cute. But Garin already knew that this pretty girl was the type that was cool on the outside but friendly on the inside, so he wasn't deceived by her appearance. It was, after all, Felicity who introduced him for his membership at the library. Otherwise, he would not have gotten in. Because he had no idea about the existence of such a library in the city in the first place. Garin switched to a more comfortable sitting position, took a red-covered book from the table and casually browsed it. The book was a record about coats of arms. It had detailed entries about the coats of arms of famous families within the Confederation and throughout the world. "Even though it's a holiday, how did you find the time to come over to Huaishan?" Felicity continued to read with her head down. "It's quiet here, unlike in Manroland, where I'd be bothered by a bunch of flies." After they had previously met, they chatted about jewelry of tragedy. Garin's immense interest in antiques of tragedy had fueled Felicity's eagerness to chat about the topic, given that she had always been fond of unique and mysterious antiques and jewelry. Felicity could tell that Garin wasn't the type of person that would deliberately approach her for ulterior motives, so she let down her guard. When it came to her favorite topic of mysterious antiques and jewelry, he showed a very serious attitude and seemed very eager to listen. Felicity couldn't help but have a good impression of Garin, and the both of them chatted in a small cafe for 5 to 6 hours before reluctantly calling it a day. Since then, Felicity had taken the initiative to help Garin apply for access to the library and a library card. Both of them could be regarded as pure antique and jewelry enthusiasts. "That must be tiring for you, always hiding." Garin smiled. "Oh yeah, I thought you said you found a new goodie the last time?" How's that going? Felicity put down her book. Her brows furrowed, she seemed frustrated. It's difficult for me to get my hands on it. The seller wouldn't sell it, even after I made him 2 offers. Looks like he is genuinely reluctant to part with the item. What is it? A lucky bow from the great maritime era, a mermaid bust that has been said to bring luck. A mermaid bust? How much did you offer? Garin licked his lips and asked. 250,000. For a mermaid bust bow, 250,000 is indeed a bit low. But this is the maximum amount of cash I can move recently, any more and I can't afford it. I don't even have much pocket money. Felicity's small face looked distressed. Let's not talk about that then. Oh yeah, any news about the 2 pieces of jewelry I asked you to help me investigate? Garin changed the topic. That's easy. Felicity paused, and started recalling, those 2 pieces of jewelry, one of them is Marceline's blue fantasy. According to legend, it was an antique jewelry created by a master jeweler named Marceline for her lover. The master passed away due to illness shortly after finishing the piece. But peculiarly, the lover wearing this jewelry had continuous good fortune. Soon, he grew from an ordinary person to become a jewelry master himself and became very wealthy. The jewelry in question was displayed in one of his jewelry stores as a store treasure. Later, after it was stolen, a series of countless forgeries kept appearing, and this made it impossible to recover the real thing. This person isn't dead. Garin was surprised. Felicity rolled her eyes at him. He's alive and well. Why would he be dead? She enjoyed this relaxed feeling whenever she chatted with Garin. In front of others, all they cared about was her beauty, family, and background. In front of this ordinary boy her age, he didn't care about her appearance and background, but instead valued her most for her knowledge. Her understanding of antiques and jewelry, and especially her knowledge of mysterious jewelry. I misspoke. Garin gave an embarrassed smile. What about the other piece? Felicity leaned back, caught a black rope hanging from the wall, and gave it a light tug. Wait a minute. What do you want to order? Cuzzolini black tea then, Garin casually said. Felicity nodded. A while later, a girl in a black and white maid uniform entered the room. Anything I can get for the 2 of you? A cup of tornado coffee, a cup of Cuzzolini black tea, both warm, Felicity ordered softly. Your order is coming, please wait. The girl maid bowed in ceremony then left the room. To a side, Garin was laughing at her. I thought you liked cold drinks. What are you laughing at? Can't I occasionally have a change in taste? Felicity's cheeks turned red and started to get defensive. Do you think I'm copying you? Yes, 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 I know, I know. Garin kept waving his hand and suppressed a smile. I understand. Upon saying that, he couldn't help but burst out laughing. All right, get serious. Felicity hit the top of Garin's head with a book. The force seemed heavy, but it was actually light. Let's talk about the other piece, also a store treasure owned by this jeweler. Called Avril's Eye, it was inspired by a princess of the Weisman Empire named Avril. According to legend, she was blind from birth, but had a pair of extremely beautiful eyes. This piece was named after her eyes. It doesn't have any mysterious background, but it is said that the piece was blessed by Weisman III, in hopes that the princess' eyes would forever be as clear as the jewelry. Rumor has it that ever since this piece of jewelry went into circulation among the masses, it hasn't been seen for years, and it's unclear whether it is even real. It should be real. Garin touched his chin and whispered. How do you know? Just a guess. Garen smiled then got serious. All right, down to business. Last time you mentioned there was a new change in the halo of tragedy you bought. What change? Mind letting me have a look? Felicity pondered but did not say anything. At that moment, the maid entered bringing in the black tea and coffee, served it in front of them, and then quietly left. Hot steam rose slowly from the brown cups. Suddenly, the room seemed unusually quiet. After a while, Felicity started to open up. She frowned and rubbed her temples, seemingly bothered. I can't put my finger on it. It's just a peculiar feeling. Nothing has gone right recently, my pocket money has been restricted. Friends quarreled with me for no good reason. She paused. You know that I don't have many friends in the first place. My circle has always been narrow. Ever since I bought the halo of tragedy, it's been like this. Do you think it's really the effect of that thing? Where's your halo of tragedy? Let me have a look. Garen started frowning too. Felicity's face went scarlet in an instant. I didn't bring it with me. I'll bring it over to you next time. Chapter 40, Felicity, 2. Chapter 40, Felicity, 2. Felicity. Suddenly, a blond young man wearing a black overcoat walked into the room. Why are you still here? Still researching your antiques and jewelry? Stop fooling around, go home. You have to catch the afternoon train. Quickly go home and pack. The young man glanced at Garen who was sitting at the side. He could tell that Garen was close with Felicity. Don't keep obsessing about jewelries and antiques all day. Can you please apply yourself to something more meaningful? Felix, I can decide my matters for myself. I don't need instructions from you. Felicity bluntly replied. Researching antiques and jewelries isn't meaningful? Doing what I want to do, that's meaningful. You. The youth's face turned scarlet. You only know how to talk back at me. You leave the family business unattended, you leave your own company unattended, and you come to this god-forsaken countryside to do research about jewelries and antiques. That's just perfect. You're doing great. I dare you to not go back today. So what if I don't? Felicity coldly replied, then turned away to ignore him. Hanging around with these jewelry and antique freaks all day, skipping the family banquet. I want to see how you manage on your own. When you get into trouble. The young man was fuming. His gaze turned to Garen. One moment you're meeting this enthusiast, the next moment, another. I tell you, Felicity, these people who only know how to research antiques and jewelries, the most they can be in their lifetime is a jewelry appraiser. Hang around these people all day, and see what you'll become. Mind your words. Felicity brusquely stood up. He's my friend. Humph. The young man expressed his disdain. Father already knows about the nonsense you get up to, researching antiques and jewelries all day. He's not happy. I want to see how you explain yourself to him. That's none of your business. Don't think you can lecture me freely just because you're my brother. How rude. Garen, who was sitting at the side, frowned too. This young man, Felix, was Felicity's biological brother. His tone seemed to convey his displeasure about his sister's preoccupation with antiques, and naturally, that made him dislike the person discussing antiques with Felicity as well. Please keep your voices down. A bespectacled middle-aged maid came in and whispered. This is a public place. It's the library. Please. Keep silent. Apologies. The young man nodded before striding out the room. Felicity apologetically smiled at the middle-aged woman. Sorry about that. How embarrassing. The woman nodded and left with a strict look on her face. Felicity sat back onto the sofa, her expression distraught. Sitting at the side, Garen frowned and said, "Go back first if you're busy. Our discussions aren't that important." My brother was rude. I apologize on his behalf. Felicity was slightly frustrated. "It's nothing. I can tell your family seems to disapprove of you researching antiques and jewelries. Yeah. They think I'm loafing around." "I've been reprimanded for this multiple times," Felicity helplessly said. "My family's situation is complicated. My parents allocated more resources to me than others, so my peers aren't too happy about me. They keep finding trouble with me. You can't help it either." Garen had known about Felicity's family background from Fane. That wasn't any ordinary business family. It was a mega-family with ties to the upper class of the Confederation, with assets and businesses across several big provinces. Compared to Garen's uncle and his master Fei Bayun, they were on a completely different level. Felicity's family even had their own private militia, and her father was one of the most significant figures in the family. They sat for a while before a middle-aged man with a mature look walked into the room. He wore a black suit, had a fit physique, and looked polite. "Miss, it's time to head back. The time you set is up." Felicity nodded and sat up straight on the sofa. "Got it? This is my bodyguard, Anchor. I'll be going first, you take your time." "Okay." Garen nodded. He glanced at the man called Anchor, and he couldn't help but narrow his eyes. He got a trace impression of Golden Hoop number 102 from him, yet he seemed even stronger than Golden Hoop. Garen's took a quick glance at the man's waist. It seemed to bulge slightly, like there was something stuck there. Someone with his skill, if coupled with a handgun, as long as his marksmanship is not too bad, I'm no match against him. They are veritably a powerful family. Metropolitans are indeed different. The pride he felt from his big display of skills earlier instantly evaporated. After Felicity and her bodyguard left, Garen sat on the sofa alone. There was still a hint of guerrilla fragrance in the air. If the Golden Hoop that day were good with handguns, I wouldn't have been able to defeat him so easily. Firearms are indeed the natural enemy of martial art practitioners. He sighed and took a sip of black tea. "Fortunately, I have the black jade disc. I now have new attribute points to enhance myself." He scanned the attribute pane at the bottom of his vision. The strength on it had increased by 0.1 due to the White Cloud secret method. It was at 2.11 now. Potential had also increased to 164%. It's just that this is too slow a speed. Only 1 point increase in a week. He took a look at the skills pane. He skipped through the academic subjects and directed his line of sight at the White Cloud secret method. He paused on it for 3 seconds. The White Cloud secret method didn't move. Apparently, it could no longer be increased. So it has indeed peaked. I give up. I'll just add it to intelligence. Recently, the situation has been chaotic. Let's see how adding to intelligence will help me sort it all out. He hesitated, then directed his line of sight onto intelligence. Snap! A clear force streamed into intelligence. It increased from 1.20 to 1.50 in an instant. Garen felt his brain cool over. His stale mind instantly became unusually clear. It seemed that his reasoning, response, logic, and memory were markedly enhanced. However, this kind of enhancement was vague. There was no way to practically compare the effects before and after. According to the standard units that I initially formulated, the average level for an ordinary person would be at 1. So now, I have more than 1.5 of an ordinary person's average intellect. The intellectual restrictions for certain subjects should be gone. Under the skills column, many subjects were restricted to a base value of intelligence. Without reaching that limit, one could only acquire the skill in accordance with normal progression. Once that base value was reached, one would have photographic memory skills. Any content from a subject would be easily absorbed, thought processes would be quicker, and one would rapidly attain the level of mastery expected from enhancing with points. Now that he felt much more clear-headed, Garin started to contemplate the current situation. If I want to obtain antiques of tragedy without risk, I could pull out now and let Grace keep track of the case progression of Dale, Quicksilver and the others. I could also approach Golden Hoop through Grace's original company to buy the antiques of tragedy. Once they find a new antique of tragedy, I could offer them the highest bid possible to get it. My only worry is that I wouldn't have enough money to buy it. This is a way, but the amount of capital required is huge. I could also come at this from another perspective. I am able to analyze whether an antique is real by absorbing potential. That way, in respect of antiques of tragedy or mysterious jewelries, I have the absolute appraisal authority. As long as I improve on my knowledge and experience of identifying jewelries and antiques, it shouldn't be difficult for me to become the expert antiques of tragedy appraiser for the detective and the others. It is likely that Dale Quicksilver isn't aware of the potential within antiques of tragedy. Otherwise, he wouldn't have handed the black jade disc to me so easily. Garin already had dealings with Dale Quicksilver, so he was clear about that key point. In others' eyes, antiques of tragedy were just mysterious precious objects backed by a strange legend. In his eyes, they were valuable objects from which he could absorb potential to strengthen himself. I don't necessarily have to own them. I could plainly gain contact with the antiques of tragedy with my hybrid identity as appraiser and collector. I just need to let both sides, the detectives and Golden Hoop, recognize that I am the only one who is able to identify a real antique of tragedy without error. This way, I could stay out of the whole ordeal, yet achieve my purpose. It had to be said that since adding points to intelligence, Garin felt much more clear-headed. He had everything planned in a flash, and he even found a suitable role for himself. Right now, all that's left is to improve my knowledge of antiques appraisal. The old man should be experienced in this. Garin instantly thought of Old Man Gregor from Dolphin Antiques. Then, there's the book that Old Man Gregor mysteriously took out the other day. I have no idea what it was. It seems like the old man has secrets of his own, but it doesn't matter as long as it's not troublesome. As a man of action, Garin stood up and searched for books on antique appraisal in the series of rooms, but unfortunately, there were none. He went over to the right side of the library and searched in the special collections room, but there was nothing there either. It was a pity that there was only a handful of books in the right side of the library. Coming out of the library, Garin hailed a horse carriage and headed straight for Dolphin Antiques. Sitting in the carriage, Garin had a faint sense of irritability in his heart. He had added so many attribute points on himself, his strength had reached a high level, but when he met Felicity's brother earlier, he nevertheless failed to counter his condescending tone. Regardless of whether it was at Fabian's White Cloud Dojo, or his uncle's shady company, he was just an ordinary small character in their eyes. Even with the martial art prowess that he was so proud of, never mind firearms, he couldn't even defeat his senior brothers and sisters. Martial arts weren't a pure contest of strength. He slightly closed his eyes to rest them. Hearing the crisp clatter of hooves and the sound of wheels rolling through pavement, Garin recalled everything he had been through since arriving. Even though I have special abilities, I am currently still a common disciple at the dojo, a student at Shenying Academy, and the son of an employee at a common company. I still have to take everything one step at a time. I'm still miles away from being a true great force. He then recalled his encounter at Silver Silk Castle, which made him even more conscious of his feebleness. Chapter 41, Entanglement, 1. Chapter 41, Entanglement, 1. The carriage slowly came to a stop in front of the Dolphin Antique Store. Garin jumped out of the carriage and paid for the ride. He stepped in front of the antique store only to notice that the door was completely closed and that it was surprisingly quiet inside. He raised his head to look at the store name and knocked on the door. "Open the door, old man." "Coming. I'm coming." A seam appeared in the doorway as it cracked open. Old man Gregor grabbed Garin as he forcefully dragged him in and immediately shut the door. The store was oddly dark. Only a single oil lamp was lit on the table in front of the bookshelves. Under the dim yellow light, there was a brown and red-colored miniature hourglass. The fine black sand slowly slid down through the slim aperture and its sound echoed. Garin adjusted to the darkness within the room and glanced at the hourglass on the table. "What's this?" "Your new toy." The old man didn't respond. He slowly strolled to the table and sat down. The dim light cast on his face highlighted his fatigued and aged expression. "A friend gave me this black hourglass. It is used for tracking time and can measure a long period of time with every reset." He shook the hourglass with his hand. "I have already had this for 2 weeks and only 1/5 of the sand slid down. Don't you think it is slow?" "Indeed." Garin raised his eyebrows as he gazed at the old man's aged appearance. "Are you all right, old man? You haven't looked so well recently." Garin took a chair and sat beside the table as he adjusted the light for the oil lamp. The room brightened up. "Maybe I am sick, old man." Gregor smiled, and his perverse nature seemed to have faded. "Speak your mind, why did you make a trip down here? You usually don't visit me when you are free." "I am here to take care of the elderly. I am afraid that no one will take care of a lonely 80-year-old man." Garin laughed. "Oh, where are your children? Relatives? How come I've never seen them before?" "Who knows?" the old man complained as a glimpse of despair flashed across his face. "Okay, let's talk about something else. What's happening with you? You wouldn't visit me if you didn't have something on your mind. You know me too well." Garin saw the old man's expression and knew the topic of children probably touched on the old man's past sorrow. He changed the subject. "I am here to ask for advice on how to appraise antiques and jewelry. Since you have an antique store, you must be knowledgeable in the area." "This is simple." The old man sat up straight and glanced at Garin. "But..." He extended his palm in front of Garin. "Pa." Garin slapped a stack of cash into the old man's hand. The hand was still extended. His face solemn, Garin added $1,000 more to the pile. "Old man, open your eyes, that's $1,000 per stack. I know it is $1,000 per stack, but it takes years of knowledge and experience to build a career in appraisal. My long history in this business would warrant a small cost." Old man Gregor pocketed the $2,000 with a pleased face. "It's only $2,000. I am going easy on you. Let me teach you about the basics about the appraisal." The old man cleared his throat. Appraisal includes techniques in a few areas. The first being authenticity identification. The second is determining the age of the antique, the third is tracing the origin, and the fourth is understanding the value of the craftsmanship. All 4 areas would require an extensive amount of time to learn and practice. Which one do you want to learn first? Can I learn all of them at the same time? I am confident in myself. Learn at the same time. The old man looked at Garin under the light. He gazed blankly as his vision seemed to have blurred. "Learn all of them at the same time? Confident? It's unfortunate, but you don't have the talent," the old man said, murmuring the last sentence under his breath. After Garin improved his physical status, his hearing was also augmented. He overheard the old man's murmur, but didn't seem to mind. Everyone had their own secrets and some chose to keep them private. Can I learn about authenticity identification first? No problem. The old man suddenly seemed interested. He touched his lips as he opened the drawer below the table. He took out a stack of white paper and 2 quills and then wetted the tips with ink from a jar. Authenticity identification is the most difficult area to master in appraisal. It is dependent on the experience and time spent with antiques. He drew a circle on the white paper and marked the circle with a cross. Do you know what this is? He pointed at the shape. No, a circle-shaped window. Garin attempted to guess the shape on the figure. It's a unique symbol that belonged to a master jeweler from the Voyager era. If you understand this symbol, then it would be possible to deduce the year, level, and category related to this crucial detail. If you don't know, it would be impossible to identify anything meaningful. Garin nodded his head deep in thought. You are trying to tell me that for authenticity identification, it is not only about the craftsmanship, details related to the antique. It is also necessary to use history and special background knowledge to be able to determine whether the antique is authentic or not. You are pretty bright and quick to understand. The old man was about to state the key point, but Garin managed to guess it. He looked slightly surprised. I was about to give you a counterfeit. It would be impossible to determine the authenticity without the unique symbol. But you are quick to realize the critical insight. He paused. Since you already understand, then you know that to identify authentic antiques you must be knowledgeable in history. Craftsmanship from different eras, famous master craftsmen, genres, classifications, renowned case studies, manufacturing specifics, and production origins. A lot of times you must combine everything together to reach an accurate conclusion when appraising antiques and jewelry. So the first thing I need to do is to learn the background knowledge. Garin nodded. Are there any books? There are, but books alone won't help you that much. Take a look at them first, then I'll teach you about my appraisal experiences and special techniques. Let's do this step by step. A lot of things are not covered in the books. Other than by sight, you must also use smell, hear, touch and taste in appraisal. Only understanding the theories would be pointless without practical experience, but read the books. First, the old man dug through the bookshelf and found a white book. This is. He then grabbed a thicker black book. This is. He stacked the books together and pushed them in front of Garin. Take these home with you, then find me after you are done. Garin stared at the 2 giant books speechlessly. How long would it take for me to finish these 2? It's at least 1,000 pages per book. No rush, take it slow, as long as you finish it within a month. The old man shook his hand. Now get out of here. I need to clean up and sleep now. Garin grabbed the 2 books. Okay, I'll come and find you after I finish. Oh, hold on. The old man smacked his head. You were asking about the other book last time, right? Since you seem to have fancied that book, I'll give it to you as a small souvenir. He dug in his pants and grabbed a small pendant. It was shaped like an open book. Here you go. He threw the pendant over. Garin caught the pendant and began examining it. It was only the size of a fingernail. The pendant was delicately crafted with a pitch dash black color. The opened book had a peculiar dark red symbol inside. What's this? It was a gift from when I bought the book. Just keep it for now. The old man scratched in his pants again as if he were itchy. Garin quivered and stuffed the pendant into his pocket. Where did you find this? That's disgusting. Okay, I'll go now. Go on. The old man waved his hand with an irritated look. Garin came out of the antique shop and waited for a carriage. After none were seen for 10 minutes due to the isolated location of the store, he had to walk toward Pennington Street with his books. When he passed by his uncle's place, he looked up at his uncle's window. He caught a glimpse of Lamarth hastily walking away from the window, leaving the window shaking. It felt like he was avoiding Garin. Garin originally intended to visit his uncle, but he lost his interest when he saw that Lamarth was at home. After the conflict with Lamarth last time, Garin felt annoyed every time he saw his cousin's face. This guy has been quiet lately. Garin had walked a few steps before he heard hasty footsteps behind him. "Brother Garin!" A girl's youthful voice echoed behind him. Garin turned around and saw a young girl blushing as she ran towards him. The girl wore a white cotton shirt along with a pair of white jeans. The jeans flawlessly traced her graceful and energetic figure. At the age of 14, she didn't seem to have hit puberty. The girl carried a light fragrance that only belonged to a teenage girl. Her short light red hair set an energetic vibe in the air. "Brother Garin, you are already here. Why don't you come up?" The girl was his uncle's other child, Falia. In contrast to Lamarth, Falia always acted energetic around Garin. Because of this, Garin always enjoyed playing with younger kids. "I didn't see you, Falia." Garin smiled as he gently pinched the girl's nose. "Why did you cut your hair?" "I am learning martial arts right now." The girl performed a rudimentary move. "Where's Uncle?" "He is hosting some visitors right now. They only talk about complicated subjects. It's boring there. Can you come up and play with me?" Falia shook Garin's arm. "Next time, since Uncle is busy right now. It would be rude of me to interrupt. Also, my father was unhappy when he heard the news about the acceptance ceremony." Falia lowered her voice. "My father said that he doesn't want you to waste your time studying martial arts as long you learn enough to protect yourself. It would be a waste of time to put all your energy in it." Garin raised his eyebrows. "I thought Uncle would be happy." Part 5 of the series ends here. If you enjoyed it, please give us a like and subscribe so we can be motivated to make even better videos in the future.